So now for something that is a little bit different, but actually not so much different, so I will mention at the end. So I would like to speak about the evolution of cooperation in the context of host microbiome interactions. So first, evolution of cooperation is like a large open question in evolutionary theory, because we are thinking of a behavior that is costly to the individual that performs it and beneficial to someone else. And that would not intuitively be favored by natural selection, only that we see it all over the place. So people were puzzling with this, of course, for a long time, and classical questions involve kin selection or recurring interactions, but in the context of a large mixed population, this is still really puzzling. So I would like, we need to do something with that. So I would like to think of how to model the evolution of behavior. Just how to.
Yeah, I'm trying to get it. Should go by.
Okay. Okay, never mind. Never mind. It's okay. So
keep talking about that.
Everyone hosts microbes. Microbes affect all sorts of things in the host, including behavior. And so when we are thinking of the unit of selection, in almost all models of evolution of cooperation, the unit of selection is the individual. But in fact, the unit of selection should be some combination of the individual and its microbes. And this is particularly interesting because the interest of the microbes may be different over many questions. So I will give the example of cooperative behavior, but the problem is much more general. So if we think of microbes affecting the tendency of the host to cooperate, then natural selection on the microbe might act in favor or against, manipulating the host in a certain direction. But why would the interests of the microbes be different? And when I'm saying microbes here, I'm saying it in the most general sense. So it has to do with microbial transmission. Microbes are transmitted vertically from parent to offspring, and that is similar to genes, but they also are transmitted horizontally between interacting hosts. And that means that their mode of reproduction is different, and that selection acting on them can be different, and so the result of almost any theoretical model can be different. So I'm taking the really simplest possible models that we can think on the evolution of cooperation. We are thinking of interactions in a with prisoner's dilemma payoff, where the classical paradox that the rational act is always to the fact. You get the benefit, but you don't pay the cost of cooperation. But in that way, both individuals interacting tend to find themselves in the lower optimal. So the rational behavior does not lead you to the higher payoff eventually. And now we add microbes. So alpha is the microbes that manipulate the host to act cooperatively, and beta has no effect on behavior. Could that change the result of interactions with prisoner's dilemma payoff? So the model would assume that individuals interact, and the interesting part for us is when someone with an alpha microbe is interacting with someone with a beta microbe, but they can also transmit microbes during this interaction. Especially if we are thinking of cooperative interaction in the sense of giving someone food, then it's or shelter, it's very easy to think of microbes transmitting. And so here, this is a simple model so we can write the equation peacefully, and we can think of the proportion of cooperators in the next generation of the host. That is, what fraction of the host population would carry these microbes. And that depends on the frequencies of interactions of two cooperators and interactions of cooperator and effector. And the only thing that is different here from the classical model is the transmission rate. So we see that there is a small asymmetry here, that when a cooperator interacts with the defector, which is the worst time for the cooperator, then they have a small chance of transmitting to the defector and getting the benefit, and vice versa. So when would cooperation increase in frequency? And we can get a simple condition for that. So it depends on the benefit of cooperation to the recipient, on the cost to the actor, and on T, their transmission probability over 1 minus T. So that's a little bit similar to the classical Hamilton's rule, but instead of relatedness in kin selection, it is now transmission. So it's sort of relatedness of the microbes. But note that the microbes do not have to be related at the beginning of the interaction, because they can be related in the future. Okay, so far so good. And does it work? Yeah, it allows, in this model, cooperation would not evolve at all without transmission. This is large, well-mixed population. But if we allow transmission to increase, then there is a significant range where cooperation would evolve. And this depends a little bit on the transmission modes, who has the advantage, the microbe-inducing cooperation, or where the green line is the neutral case. Okay. So we were quite happy at that point. We wanted to make sure, we were hoping that structured population and would help, but in fact we get almost identical results with stochastic simulations. But then there is a problem. If the microbes are inducing the host to do something that the host was not interested in the short term, even if it helps it in the long term, then genes in the host could evolve to counteract this microbial manipulation. And now we will consider what happens with this gene that creates resistance to the microbial manipulation. We extend the model a bit. So we have these individuals that carry the microbe alpha and are sensitive, and they are exactly as earlier. They behave cooperatively. And the microbe beta that are sensitive are selfish. But then when they have resistance, it doesn't matter what microbes they have. They act selfishly in all times. And we can ask, when would cooperation evolve in that situation? Can it be maintained where we assume that resistance carries a cost, but this cost is not huge? The cost is delta here. So we get this model that is one step more complicated, because in addition to what we looked at earlier, we have one more factor of the cost of resistance. And the only ones behaving cooperatively are the sensitive individuals that carry the alpha microbe. But during interaction with any of the selfish individuals, they can still transmit this alpha cooperation-inducing microbe. So what would happen here? We were not very optimistic. When we constructed this model, we expected it to work under rather extreme parameters. But then the results were quite surprising. So we see here that in the black area, cooperation fixes when delta is larger than C. That makes sense, but this is rather strong. in the white area, cooperation goes extinct. But in all this area, we have intermediate levels of cooperation. Now, this is a deterministic model. So intermediate levels of cooperation are surprising because cooperators are actually better when they meet other cooperators. So what holds cooperation in this intermediate level under a very wide parameter range? And do we expect polymorphism in cooperation in natural populations? So, looking more closely at it, we find some form of the rock, paper, scissors dynamics that can go to different directions. So it's something like that. Let's look at it one by one. So we can start with the cooperators, the sensitive individuals with the alpha microbe. And then if the cost of cooperation is larger than the cost of resistance, resistance would evolve. But now, once resistance has evolved, if they have even a small disadvantage in transmission, for example, because of the manipulation, then the microbe alpha would be gone and we'll have the beta R. There is no change in behavior in that point. But if delta is larger than 0 and can be even really small, we'll then lose the resistance and find ourselves with individuals that are not resistant carrying this neutral bacteria. But then we go back to our condition. The cooperation-inducing microbe would succeed. And we expect this cycle to go on in a quite wide parameter range. And it would look like something like that. The only cooperator, these are the 4 types, but the only cooperator is the green one. And it can take us to different places. So it can stabilize, or when selection favoring the cooperation is strong enough, we can overshoot and go to chaotic oscillations. But then that doesn't seem very promising for survival of cooperation in natural populations. It's nice in the model with infinite population, but not so expected. Particularly this situation where we go very, very close to 0 a lot of time. So we first wanted to test what happens if we just take a finite population here. It's still a mixed population. It's a very similar model, but only finite population. And we see that the area that allows cooperation to survive shrinks. But then natural selection and natural populations are structured. So we can make simulations where individuals do not interact with anybody in the population at random, but rather interact only with individuals that are close to them. And when we say interact, it means both cooperation and potential for transmission. And in that situation, these are the 2 down graphs, we see that we can get cooperation under a wide parameter range because the population structure limits the dynamics in a way that they don't take it to fixation. I wanted to make sure that this is actually happening. So this is like the simulation run, and you see here the different, on the right, you see the different genotypes or combinations of host and microbiome genotypes co-evolving in the population with significant fluctuations, but not as dramatic as we've seen in the infinite mixed population. Okay. So conclusions. This is not entirely the end yet, because the natural selection may favor microbes that manipulate the hosts to cooperate, and so it can rescue the hosts from the prisoner's dilemma in some cases. We need the combination. The fact that the microbe interests are different than those of the host are because of the combination of horizontal transmission and vertical transmission. And we can get microbe-induced cooperation even under transmission disadvantage and even under a resistance of the host, suggesting that factors that eliminate microbes in general can affect host cooperation. But of course, this is not the only case where microbes may be important. So we looked at several other examples, but it appears that parental care, well, of course, when caring to the offspring, then you also have a good chance of transmitting microbes, even if the offspring is not genetically related. We thought about low-cost aggregation. I wondered about, with Talia's talk, like aggregation can be an interest of the host under some circumstances, but can also be an interest of the microbes. And at least in the low-cost aggregation, we found that indeed the microbes that are highly transmissible are the ones with the strongest interest in inducing aggregation. We can think of dynamics within the host. There can be different dynamics by, we have a population of microbes in the host. We didn't mention it here, but it's actually really important and can play a role in different situations. And we can think of aggressive behavior, the octave situation, or aging. And in fact, practically in every theoretical questions that we tried to look at, it appeared that the microbes and the host have somewhat different interests. Now, I'm not saying that the microbes are deciding alone what would happen, just that we have a combination of forces that act on the host. And one thing for the cultural evolution. So it appears that we could say culture instead of microbes, and it would have vertical transmission from parents to offspring. And also individuals imitate the behavior of individuals that they meet in some cases. So it appears that our model suggests that if individuals imitate the behavior of individuals they have interaction with, then cultural evolution would lead to increased cooperation. But of course, if we allow transmission to be wide and not linked to the interaction, then it breaks down. So if you can transmit widely, we need a completely different model, and in fact, cooperation is less successful. Okay, so I would like to thank many wonderful students that were involved in this work over the years. I would like to thank the organizers of this conference. It was really fun and exciting for me in the last 2.5 days or so. And well, thanks to all the fundings that supported our crazy stuff. And thank you.
We have time for a question while the next speaker comes in.
So I'm interested, if I understood, the transmission was a fixed parameter. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if, possibly a reason that a microbe might induce its host to interact is to increase its own transmission. Is that something you've thought about?
So definitely you would expect it with respect to behaviors that also increase transmission.
Yeah.
These are the behaviors most likely, like sharing
cooperation.
food
Yeah.
or shelter or aggregating or whatever. Absolutely.
questions.
And you can even think of variation between the microbes, who is better. Like in any transmission, you can be transmitted back.